Good evening once again, everybody. Hell's Unicorn here. And it now appears that the state of New York has actually legalized the union of homosexuals in holy matrimony. I am primarily talking about this topic because I've actually been getting a fair amount of chatter in my private message bank regarding this topic. There are a number of people who I associate with who are of a much more conservative Christian mindset when it comes to certain social issues, and in many respects I tend to hold common ground with them. This is the one issue where I tend to differ with them a little bit. What is going on here, primarily, just to keep everything in the realm of factual inquiry, is that people who desire to have a certain status via state government have gotten what they wanted. That's really all this is about. There is a certain benefit that comes with having an official cohabitation license granted by the state, so to speak. It comes with certain tax advantages, it comes with certain rights to hospital visitation, and so on and so forth. The thing is, though, is that what is being restored here, in terms of the language being used, is something that was not really being deprived of them. Just to be clear here, the tax status and the actual visitation rights at the hospital, that is stuff that they were being deprived of by virtue of current state policy. But what they were not being deprived of was the so-called right to marry. There is nothing that prevents anyone from becoming married. Being married is not something that the state can actually give to you. It's something that you agree to with another person or another party, just to keep it a little bit more general, by way of contract. The state comes in only insofar in that it either recognizes or refuses to recognize that contract. Now, coming from my persuasion, that contract, by virtue of it being a contract, gets recognized by the governing authority no matter what kind of contract it is. It is an agreement between two people, and it's been signed, therefore it is legally binding in court. As far as I'm concerned, that's the full extent of the governmental aspects of marriage. Homosexuals are free to, at any time, to find a religious institution that concurs with their particular lifestyle. And they don't really even need a religious institution to do this. All they need is pen and paper and the ability to sign their names. That's all that's needed. What are we really talking about here when we're talking about the issue of gay marriage? We're talking about three things. We're talking about recognition, we're talking about certain legal privileges, and we're talking about a political wedge issue. And I'll deal with each of these one by one. Let's start with the first one. Let's start with the general concept of recognition. And this is intended primarily for those who have subscribed to my channel who are homosexual. I know that there's a couple of you in there, and I just for the record, I want to make clear, when it comes to issues like these, I'm generally on your side on this stuff. What sort of recognition would you personally think that you would get out of having a quote-unquote law that states that the state officially recognizes gay marriage, apart from the economic and civil aspects of it under law enforcement and redistribution of wealth? what we're really getting at here ultimately is, do you think that this will change the minds of the people that passed that proposition, or got that proposition passed not too far back in California, that actually defined marriage as something other than what you think it ought to be? I think the obvious answer to that question is no. The Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, the Roman Catholic Church, the Missouri Synod of the Lutheran Church and the Wisconsin Synod, the OPC, or the Orthodox Presbyterian Church, the Baptist League, do you think any of these institutions are going to change their minds about what they think of you because of this little law being passed? No, that's not going to happen. What's actually going to happen here is something that plays into the third point I made, which I will address a little later. Let's deal with the second aspect of this, which is the actual economics. It is my personal opinion that the stance of the state on the issue of cohabitation is neutral, except insofar as there is a legal binding contract that is agreed to by both parties. Henceforth, I don't really have any opposition to what happens here, because homosexuals are tax-paying citizens, and if there is a way for them to gain some sort of tax write-off by engaging in some sort of behavior, then by all means go ahead and do it. Doesn't make one difference to me whatsoever. Makes no difference to me that Pennsylvania will recognize your marriage license from New York, provided that you maintain a residence there. Doesn't make one bit of difference to me whatsoever. It's not going to impact anything about my life and about my views on the subject, both from a theistic standpoint and from a pragmatic political standpoint. But it would be so much better, if I, as a heterosexual, were not being pulled around economically through all of these so-called incentives to behave a certain way. It would be so much better if all of us were able to determine what we were going to do with our own wealth and our own liberty, without all of these laws to distort our economic behavior and to attempt to manipulate it. This marriage licensing thing, as far as I see it, is a tool that plays into the third part of this assertion that I had made earlier. Political wedge issue. Ultimately, if a rational and consistent solution to the marriage question were to be agreed to by all parties, it would be agreed that community sovereignty and freedom to associate and disassociate with whoever one chooses to could solve all of this. The Baptist League, who are probably the most fanatical on this point, could probably be convinced to leave well enough alone, provided that they knew that the state that they were living under had a neutral stance on the issue. They would be free to have their views on the matter, and they would keep those views within their own congregations, in their own chapels, which is the way that this country did things until the marriage licensing issue came up. Now, there's always this counter-argument that people had a very negative attitude towards homosexuality in that period. Well, what changed really? I mean, homosexuality, for the large part, came out of the closet, and now it's out there for everybody to see, but for the most part, attitudes haven't changed. It's just the people that were keeping their particular persuasion secret are now out in the open about it. And there are people who hold elective office who find this situation a bit useful to their own ends. The people who push this issue that are in government and the people that rage against this issue in government both have one thing in common. They profit from the conflict. The religious right has a very strong voice in the House of Congress, the houses of Congress, and occasionally they get into the Oval Office. The progressive left, who pander to the other side of this equation, do the same thing. And both of these parties have as a core philosophy the notion of manipulation and control through state force and violence. So at the end of the day, everybody fights and everybody loses. I'm simply a bystander in this respect, a bystander who's commenting on what's going on. As far as I'm concerned, I'm just a mere spectator. I'm not taking part in the fight. I'm not on anybody's side, and yet at the same time I'm on everybody's side. Everybody is free to have an attitude and an opinion on things like this, provided that that opinion is kept within the bounds of one's own personal space, so to speak. Part of me says good for New York because more people have been given an opportunity to get out of paying taxes that they shouldn't have to pay, and that they are allowed to do something that they should be allowed to do via contract, which is visit someone who they consider family. But another part of me says nothing's really been accomplished here. The issue will burn on. People, tempers will flare, votes will be cast, and property rights will be lost in the process, along with more of our liberties. You see, that's the thing. The beauty of wedge issues is that they take one aspect of liberty and set it against the rest. That is the inherent genius of divide and conquer politics. Cut away all of the general aspects of liberty and focus on one specific thing, and convince people that in order to aspire to this one little smidget, this one little tinge of liberty, we have to destroy the rest of it, because we need a massive state with the force of a law that they can come up with by themselves at any time to destroy however much of it they want to serve their own ends and purposes. I fail to be ecstatic about things like this when I see people getting bat over the head with billy clubs at protests, when I see bombs getting dropped in other countries, when I see government officials writing their own warrants, kicking in doors, and shooting people in cold blood. SWAT teams emptying entire clips into somebody simply because he has a gun in his hand and he's prepared to defend himself against what he perceives to be a potential home invasion. That's stuff that I'm really concerned with. The gay marriage thing, it's unfortunate that we're in a position where we have to fight with each other in order to get some of our property rights back, but it's not high on my priority list. And I fail to see how even somebody who is intimately involved in this issue can't just be taken aback by the fact that whether or not they succeed at this, that in the grand scheme of things, it's just a single drop of water in a desolate desert, soon to be swallowed up. It's not the monsoon of liberty that everybody thinks it is. And this drought of liberty will eventually lead to dehydration and death. With prudence to myself and benevolence to all of you, good evening.